Yeshua, your King of praise. Shalom, everyone. This is Messianic Rabbi Buzz Tremé, the Jew teaching you. Welcome to our Bible study. Yeshua, you are the way. Yeshua. However, it is more often referred to as simply as the law. Now we're talking about the covenant. It's sometimes just simply called the law. The Hebrew word for law is Torah, which means instruction. And it was not ever meant to be taken in a bad sense. Sometimes people hate law so much that when they see it in the Bible, they associate it with the Jews and they hate it all. We're not unlaw? We're not lawless. You know, we understand law. Law has to be because humanity is not yet transformed. We all still have we need stop. How many of you know we need stop signs? We need speed limits. And you should obey them. You should. Boy, it's hard, huh? Okay. So God gave His instructions, His law, to the people of Israel on Mount Sinai in Arabia, and that's Galatians 4:25. The New Testament makes reference to this covenant often and sometimes uses the term Old Covenant. Now, remember this thing, old and new? Very often people who don't know the covenants, now you're getting a chance to learn them and break them apart. They knew the difference. So the covenant referred to as the old was the system Israel was given to live under. The Mosaic, all right? Abraham came before that, and the Mosaic was attached to the Abrahamic covenant, but the Abrahamic covenant wasn't the law. This is 430 years later. So you have to remember, when we're looking back at the Abrahamic promises, they were made in the Abrahamic covenant. It wasn't a law, it was different. It just set this bloodline apart from the rest of the nations. So the law does not include Abraham. Very important to understand that. Sometimes people read Abraham's life and refer to him as having been under the law just because it was a part of the Old Testament. No. Okay. The adjectives old and new are comparative terms used to distinguish the Mosaic covenant, here called the old, from the new covenant established by Yeshua. Are y'all following me on this and staying right there? Okay. Both the old covenant and the new covenant were established with the house of Israel and with no other nations. Gentiles are heirs with Israel by invitation. The Gentiles were invited into both covenants, but both belonged to Israel. And if you lived 500 BC, for example, I or you could have gone to the Jewish priests and say, what must I do to be under your law? I want the blessings that your God has promised you. I am fascinated with your God. Well, there was a procedure, and basically it was the same for men and women. They had to sit through an extensive teaching, understanding what it was about. They had to be baptized, and if you were a man, you had to undergo circumcision. Okay, because it would be a man who would have his flesh cut away that would save everybody. Yeshua. All right. Let's look at Jeremiah 31:31. Jeremiah 31:31. And Jeremiah was alive and doing his prophesying around 600. He lived after that, and he actually died in Egypt. Jeremiah 31:31. Very good book, Jeremiah. And what has happened is Israel is left to, by now the northern kingdom had been scattered, broken up into pieces, and basically transformed. They were more like Gentiles than Jews. And the hub of all Jewish activity was in Judah. And this is where the term Jew comes from. They were in the area of Jerusalem, the state of Judah, the southern kingdom. But the southern kingdom followed suit, and the Assyrians had attacked Israel, the northern kingdom, in 722 BC. Now we get down to 600 BC, and Judah's about to fall captive. They'll be taken by the Babylonians, which had overpowered the Assyrians and become the world power. That's Iraq today. So we have Syria and Iraq, and all of these places exist today. Persia is Iran. So the Babylonians are getting ready to come down and take Judah, which is all that's left of Israel, take the Jews into captivity. And they're going to take them there for 70 years because Jeremiah prophesied it, that they would be there 70 years. And Daniel, who comes, he's a little younger than Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, these are all prophesying at the same time. But Jeremiah's in Jerusalem telling the people, they're coming. Don't fight these guys. They're coming. It's me, the Lord, who raises up this mighty weapon, this destructor. I'm the one that fanned the flames of the forge to make him a weapon, and I'm going to use him against you. It's a bad nation, and I've chosen to use this developed bad nation against you. When I'm done with their taking you into captivity for 70 years, then I'll deal with them. Because they're bad to the bone. I need somebody bad to the bone for this purpose, so I'm taking them. And by the way, King Nebuchadnezzar gets saved. I don't know if you know that, but he has to spend 7 years eating, like a bird. It said his fingernails and toenails were like that of a bird. His beard and hair were wet with the dew. He was grazing like an animal because he blasphemed God. He mocked God. Said he was the great power of the world. God said, have an animal mind and see how you do with that. Gave him an animal mind. 7 years later, the curse is lifted. He comes to his senses and puts signs all throughout the land. The Lord God, the God of the Jews, is the great God. It's a really good story. A lot of times people overlook that and just want to speak bad about Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, we say in English. All right, so I wanted you to know that. So Ezekiel was out in the countryside prophesying, it's coming, it's coming. He was taken captive 11 years before it happened. He was over there in the countryside. He was a priest, and he became a prophet of God. God called him to be a prophet to Israel, saying, guys, in a decade, all Hades is going to break loose on Judah. And God says, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm fed up with you offering your sacrifices in my temple. You've got idols in my temple to other gods. I'm up to here with it. And so Ezekiel was there prophesying. Jeremiah, okay, don't even go there, Buzz. Jeremiah was prophesying in Jerusalem and telling the Jews, they're coming. And there were other prophets that were popular with the people. You hear that a lot in our time period. We have people who are, anyway, there are people prophesying out of their own minds, what they want. I've heard anyway, a lot of it goes on. It's normal. But the true prophet's going to speak what God says. It's just never welcome. It's not always happy, huh? And so, I start thinking about all that stuff with COVID and how the prophets were saying, it'll be here a few days and gone just as quickly as it came, you'd think. Now, anyway, so you had prophets that were being pressured by the people to tell them God was going to kick those Babylonians behind. And Jeremiah said, hide and watch. You're going to wish this had never happened. If you resist them, they'll kill you. Yield to them and you'll go off into captivity. So in 586 they went. Well, over in Babylon, in Iraq today, Daniel rose up and became the prophet there. So this is where they all fit in this thing. But here's what Jeremiah says in 31:31. He gave them all kinds of hope. Don't forget that. Jeremiah said, destruction's coming, but I promise you, later I will return you and I will bless you. Keeps promising good things. You need a good paddling, but later, once you got the message and you grow up, come back to me, I'm going to bless you. So, and by the way, Jeremiah lived to see Jerusalem fall, and he walked around and watched the siege machines tear God's city apart, and he wept, and he wrote the book of Lamentations. He lamented during that time. Whew, gives me chills. All right, verse 31 of Jeremiah 31. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant. With whom? The house of Israel and with the house of Judah. These were two parts of a whole that had been divided, and Ezekiel said they will be joined back again, all 12 tribes complete. Woo. It will not be like the covenant I made with their forefathers. This is the law, the Mosaic covenant. It will not be like that covenant I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant. Man, when God was establishing the covenant, they were breaking it. Remember? They were having an orgy, and Moses went down with the tablets and threw it at them. Remember that story in Exodus? He says, and God says, though I was a husband to them. That's something, huh? When you marry a people and they just are unfaithful. Ooh. So, verse 33, this is the covenant I will make. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel. And after that time, declares the Lord, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God and they will be my people. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We're talking about the new covenant. Now, the book of Hebrews chapter 7 and 8 elaborate on this, and they quote those same scriptures, and they said, what was wrong with the old covenant? And they clearly say, God says, something was wrong with it. What was wrong? It was given to a people who had no capability of living up to its standard. No way. Why? Because they had a fallen nature. So how did God get around that and change it? He sent His Son in the likeness of sinful man to die for each and every one, to redeem those who were born under that covenant and under law, under sin. And once they were freed from it, then there was no they were as perfect as God is perfect. He says, now I'll give you the deposit guaranteeing what is to come, the Holy Spirit, which is the seal of the new covenant. So the big problem was during those transitional years, Israel struggled to figure out how to live in this new covenant because they had 15 to 1600 years of law practice. And now they're living to the freedom of the new covenant, but yet they're still Jews and they're still among people who will hurt you if you break the law. And their thing was, we're not bound to it. Paul, he got beat up a lot, right? Can you imagine that? He got beat up a lot, and here he was, one who was beating other people up because they weren't keeping the law. He did it to Christians. He said, I was a violent man. And then the Lord appeared to him and said, hey, you love me, but you're going about it the wrong way. I'm going to show you the way. And he starts preaching and calling it the way. So there's a new way to serve God in spirit and in truth. This is what the Father seeks in John chapter 4. Y'all remember the story, huh?
Oh, Yeshua.